You wake up coughing smoke. It scratches the back of your throat like a cat that refuses to be tamed, and you gag before you even open your eyes. Your mouth tastes of last night's ashes and yesterday's onions. Your first breath hurts. Your second is a negotiation. Somewhere above you the rafters hold the dawn in thin grey stripes, like a miser letting in only what light he cannot keep. The house has settled into its usual chorus. The soft huff of the pig, the mutter of a chicken dreaming of grain, the steady wheeze of your uncle who always sleeps, like he's arguing with death and insisting on one more hour. Straw crackles under you. Something in it flea-lows, the tiny republic of creatures that pay no tithe moves against your skin. Your blanket scratchy and half damp from yesterday's fog is more smell than warmth, smoke, sweat, wet wool. The sour trot of river water hauled too late in the day. You pull it away and sit up slowly, because sitting up quickly makes the room tilt, and the room is small enough already without trying to turn it into a tossed boat. There is breath-white cold in the air. Your fingers, when you rub your eyes, feel like they belong to someone who died last winter and came back only to do chores. The hearth is a black mouth with a few orange teeth. You stir the embers with the iron and coax them with a whisper that is part prayer, part threat. A thread of flame wakes. The smoke board, with sleeping on the rafters, slides down to greet you and stings your eyes until tears cut bright paths through the soot on your cheeks. Behind you, a child turns over and presses her feet against your back, small and cold as apples pulled from the cellar. Your mother makes the sound she makes every morning, the one that says, "I'm alive, but I shouldn't have to prove it again." She sits up, coughs once, twice, then nods to the day like it's a neighbour she doesn't trust. Outside, a rooster declares the obvious with heroic certainty, which is the rooster's only talent. You feed the little flame with yesterday's kindling and a twist of dry straw. It clings reluctantly at first, then remembers what burning is for. When the pot goes on the trivet, the sound of water thinking about boiling becomes the house's new music. You add a fist of barley scrapings, and the last heel of bread crumbled hard as a saint's knuckle. Breakfast is not a meal so much as a practice of faith. You believe that what you spoon into your mouth will be enough to keep you upright until the sun moves to a better position in the sky. Your father's boots thump to the floor. He stands joints creaking like the cottage itself. He ties his belt nods at the hearth and gives you a look that is both thanks and schedule. The look says there is the field, there is the sky, and between them, us. He steps outside to piss, and the door's draft brings in a ravel of morning wet earth wood smoke from 3 houses over the sour-sweet breath of the dung heap warming in its own ideas. You tilt the pot and stir. A bubble breaks, then another, as if the porridge is considering an argument it knows it will lose. A few more crumbs go in a mercy disguised as economy. The child wakes fully now and asks the question she always asks. Is it today? She means feast day, market day, any day that is not this day. You tell her the truth because lies are too expensive. It is field day again. Bowls come down wooden scarred, rinsed last night in the river until the water went black around your wrists. You pour carefully because the pot is heavy with not enough. Steam climbs your face and wets your lashes. Everyone eats without talking, at first the way soldiers load arrows before they shout. The porridge tastes like warm patience. You swallow the last spoonful and lick the back of it, because sometimes the back of the spoon remembers more than the bowl. When the eating is done, you scrape what remains back into the pot. Later the pot will be scraped again for the pig, and later still the pig will be scraped for you. Nothing is wasted except time, which wastes itself. Your mother ties a rag around your left wrist, where the skin has cracked from cold and soap ash, and you shove your feet into the boots that have learned the shape of your life. They are mud before you reach the door. Outside is the colour of tin. The village exhales its morning doors, opening hens, scolding a dog, shaking yesterday off its coat. You shoulder the hoe, and the day slips onto your back without needing to be asked. Your father has already started down the path. His step that mixture of hurry and surrender all fathers learn. You follow, because following is what the living do when the dead are busy. The lane is a ribbon of last night's rain, stitched with boot prints. Smoke from 20 roofs climbs and tangles, and the bell at the little church gives a single testing note, as if to see whether God is awake. Fields wait beyond the hedges sullen, and wet the kind of earth that promises blisters for breakfast and silence for supper. You pass the mill and glance at its door. Even when there is no one standing in it, the mill watches you like a tax collector who dreams in flour. At the gate, you pause to look back. The cottage is a smudge against the hedge, small, stubborn, and absolutely yours in every way that doesn't matter. Inside it are the people who will survive the day if you do. You touch the gatepost once, twice the way. You always do a ritual nobody taught you, and so the only honest kind. Your palm comes away with a little green on it. There are worse blessings. You step into the field. The ground rises to meet you, wet and cold and real. A rook lifts from the fence post and complains about your timing. You put the hoe into the first row, and the world narrows to the length of your reach, of the width of your breath, the weight of your body, repeating what your body did yesterday. Somewhere far away, a lord wakes in linen and chooses his mood for the day. You choose your grip. Smoke still sits in your lungs, a ghost that refuses to leave. You cough once, wipe your mouth with the back of your hand, and begin again. The sky, low, grey, undecided, hangs above you like a question no one plans to answer. You answer anyway, the only way you can, by cutting a line through the soil that will feed you if the weather is feeling generous and the miller is feeling fair and God is feeling awake. The day has started. It will last forever. It will end before you know it. Your breakfast is grey and possibly alive. It sits in the wooden bowl like a small, tired rain cloud that decided to retire into porridge. You stir it with a spoon that has known every season of your mouth, and a thin ribbon of steam curls up as if the food is whispering. Keep expectations low, and you won't be disappointed. Someone has called it pottage since before you were born barley scrapings, a memory of beans last summer's leeks, pretending they still remember sunlight. If there is meat in it, the meat is a rumour. You sip the small beer, the breakfast ale, which is more a polite idea than a drink. It tastes faintly of bread trying to become water or the other way around. The liquid puts out the last sparks of your cough. You drink because the river is honest about its intentions, and you'd rather not die of honesty today. The cup's rim is rough where it cracked, and was mended then cracked again. You run your thumb along the fault, a map of tiny defeats. Your mother slips a pinch of salt into the pot, the way she does when she thinks no one is looking. Salt is treasure, and treasure belongs to the future. But futures get impatient, and a pinch today can be the difference between swallowing and remembering. The porridge thanks her by becoming slightly less tragic. The portion is measured in the careful mathematics of hunger. 1 ladle for each adult, a smaller one for the child. A scraping for the pig later, unless the pig persuades your sister that squealing is speech. You lift the spoon. The first mouthful is heat and texture and obligation. Chew long enough, and it becomes a story about fields. Chew longer, and it becomes the field's answer. Beneath the quiet of eating accounting begins. Bread you have none this morning. Yesterday was mill day, and the miller's smile cost as much as his stone. He took his multure, the lawful handful of your flour, and some unlawful dust that fell toward his own sack at just the right moment. The mill always looks innocent, even when it is stealing. The law says you must grind at that mill, bake at the Lord's oven, and brew under the assize that blesses taxes with the scent of yeast, custom, they call it. You have learned that custom is the name people give to chains they've worn so long they think the weight is their own idea. You scrape the bowl, it is time to court bread anyway. A heel is left from yesterday hard as a saint's patience. You cradle it in your palm, a small planet of sustenance with the gravity of a stone. To soften it, you float it briefly in the beer and press it against your tongue. The beer gives it a breath of life, and for a second your mouth forgets to be cynical. Then the bread remembers what century it is. The child taps her spoon against the bowl rim, a code only children know. Mark it soon, she asks, and you shake your head. Market days are rare coin. The Lord's levy skimmed the fat off your week, and the day itself will swallow the rest. Feast days she tries. You tell her honesty again, not today. Her face folds into the first draft of a frown. At least the fire is awake now, licking the black of the pot into a friendlier iron. Heat is a comfort that expects nothing in return except wood you do not have. You set the spoons aside and stand. Before you face the field, there are rounds to make with the little kings of morning, those whose doors you must knock, even when you owe them nothing but your shadow. The miller for one. You still smell flour in your hair from yesterday, and suspect he left the grind a touch coarse on purpose, so you would have to come back sooner. And the alewife will want her news the way she wants everyone's news, so she can pour it into cups and call it hospitality. The lane is damp with last night's arguments between sky and earth. You pass the church, which pretends not to watch you, and the stocks which never bother pretending. At the oven house, a cluster of women stands like a hedge of impatience, loaves under cloth, faces pinched in the chill. The great communal oven breathes a dragon's warmth. Its keeper, a thin man with a thick ledger, takes the loaves and cuts a notch on his tally. The Lord's oven, the Lord's share, he says, as if the words are noble. You count the coppers you do not have, and hand him the last one you do. The loaf will return later lighter, by heat lighter, by duty. You hear someone whispers behind you, a size officer's coming this week, tasting weighing. The women roll their eyes in unison. They know how assizes work the day before the inspector arrives. Every loaf swells with virtue, every ale behaves. The day after shrivelling, resumes like a resumed prayer. Bread law is theatre. Hunger is not. You step away before the oven keeper asks after your soul. The alley to the alewife's cottage smells of good intentions and damp wood. She is already at work, sleeves rolled arms, strong from lifting barrels and babies. Morning she sings. Her ale is thin enough to keep a child upright and thick enough to convince a man his day might just cooperate. You trade a sliver of cheese you pretended not to have for a refill of the little pitcher. She nods at the jug, like a priest returning a relic. Tell your father I watered it less this time, she says, which could mean anything at all. On the way back, you pass the mill. The water wheel turns with self-satisfied gravity like a round sermon about inevitability. The miller himself appears in the doorway, flour on his sleeves, law on his side. Back so soon, he calls, smiling, the way cats smile. You lift the jug and grin. Not for you, he laughs. The sound is the clatter of coins, finding only one pocket. Home smells of smoke and the decision to keep going. Your mother is scraping the pot for the pig, which is to say, for later, you and the child is wrapping a string twice around her wrist to measure how long until the sun gets to the church roof. You pour the ale into a smaller jug for the field. There will be water in the ditch, of course, and the ditch has opinions about your health. Eat a crust, your mother says, pressing the brittle heel into your hand. It will remind you who you are. You take the crust and the hoe. The crust tells you that you are someone who puts your mouth to work before your back. The hoe tells you your back will catch up. Before you leave, you tuck a thumbnail of salt into your pouch. You don't know why. Perhaps to sanctify the day, perhaps to remember that flavor is possible. Outside the sky is the color of pewter and does not care about your arrangements. The village is already engaged in its morning symphony hens, memorializing injustice children, learning how to shout their names, a dog arguing with its own tail. You swallow the last of the beer and wipe your mouth with your sleeve. Breakfast has ended without starting. You are fed enough to be expected to work, and hungry enough to work as if you might someday be fed. The bowl, rinsed and leaned against the wall, looks relieved to have done its part. You shoulder the hoe, kiss the child's hair, and nod to your mother. Then you step into the lane that leads through the village toward the low waiting fields where the rules of bread are written in soil and time and other people's ledgers. You have survived breakfast. It is the closest thing to victory here. Your hands blister before the sun even rises. Skin remembers faster than the mind. It knows the shape of the haft, the rasp of old wood, the small betrayals of a tool repaired one winter too late. You test the edge of the iron with your thumb, and it answers with a dull honesty. It will bite soil, not argue with it. Argument is for people with parchment. The path from the village to the open fields is a wet ribbon hemmed with hedge and thorn. Larks stitch themselves into the grey. You carry the hoe. Your father leads the oxen with a patience born of several lifetimes he didn't choose to live. The beasts exhale sweet steam. They are the village's slow engines, 2 ribs and 4 hooves between your family and the kind of hunger that writes its own psalms. You step through the gate, and there it is, the great quilt of strips, earth sewn into long ridges like the ribs of a sleeping animal. Ridge and furrow. Lovely name for a back-breaking fact. Your family's strips are scattered here and there, a legal mosaic, designed to make sure no soil is too rich with luck or too poor with despair. No one in the village owns a whole. You own fractions, like a prayer, divided among many throats. Work begins in the small way. It always begins setting the plough, checking the yoke, spitting into your palms, choosing the first line, as if what you pick now might change your life. Your father clucks the oxen lean, and the iron nose breaks the skin of the field. Soil lifts. The first furrow rolls, like a slow breath. Underneath the dark is almost purple. You will end this day smeared with its grammar. You walk behind the plough, one hand on the stilt, one hand on your own lower back, as if to remind it that you two are in this together. The earth is wet and stubborn, a tired mule of a substance. Every few steps the share finds a stone that remembers a glacier and throws the memory into your shins. You learn diplomacy, you adjust the depth curse politely, and go on. Around you other fields wake. From across the boundary balk, you hear Ned's oxen complaining in the low vowel of animal patience. A woman farther downslope sings to keep rhythm with her hoe, a song whose words were sharpened by women long dead. A boy drives crows from seed with a rag tied to a stick. He is not much older than hunger. Smoke from the village makes a grey wreath over the hedges. It smells of breakfast you've already survived. The bailiff appears as sunlight considers appearing. He rides a pony that would rather be somewhere else, a tidy man with a ledger face. Corvée days are marked as neatly in his mind as saints on a calendar, and he has a gift for remembering how much each family owes the Lord in muscle. Today is half yours, half his. Keep the furrows straight, he says, as if crookedness costs more when poor men do it. He leans in his saddle long enough to make sure the threat arrives. then moves on to spread it around. He is not cruel exactly. He is thorough. Thoroughness is how simple men become complicated. Your strips rise and fall like the sea. On the crest of a ridge, the wind finds your chest. In the trough, it finds your knees. Your boots grow taller, with each step shod in a second pair made of the field itself. You measure time the way farmers do, by distance, by sweat, by how far the sun has crawled from the church spire toward the ash tree that looks like an old woman, pointing where you already know to go. By mid-morning, your breath has become a metronome, and your shoulders have divided into two nations at war over a border called the neck. At the edge of the third strip, a stone turns up that is more idea than object. Your father pries it free with the iron bar you share with Ned's family and lets it sit in the field's mouth like a rotten tooth. Later, someone will roll it into the boundary line and declare the hedge improved. Improvements accumulate a line of stones, a deeper ditch, a scar on your wrist from last autumn's enthusiasm. The field keeps everything you give it, and some of what you don't. You stop to drink. The ale is a patient friend. It reminds you politely who you are and encourages you to carry on being that person for another hour. Water glints in the ditch like a joke told by a cruel uncle. You wipe your brow with your sleeve and leave behind a line of salt that will season no one's soup. The child from the next strip waves a stick at rooks and then at you, as if you're both untrustworthy birds. A hedgehog crosses your furrow with the kind of confidence that suggests it owns a deed. You press your palm against the small of your back and watch it go, relieved that something in this country can carry its home without complaint. In the distance, the mill turns, declaring the obvious about necessity. The church bell stammers a short thought. Work is the subject work, the verb work, the object. The sentence ends where you fall down. At noon, bread appears from a sack, the kind of bread that would deny its relationship to wheat if questioned under oath. You sit with your father on a sleeper of old oak left by a ploughman who trusted tomorrow. The crust cracks like thin ice. You each dip a piece in the ale and chew until you've earned the right to swallow. Your father sighs in a language older than French, older than Latin. Good soil, he says at last, which means it could be worse, which means it usually is. Work tightens again, like a bootlace pulled by a hand that has lost patience. You guide the plough along the straight. You swear is straight, even if the bailiff later calls it a sermon about sin. Blisters introduce themselves properly, now small coins of pain that will buy you exactly nothing. Your left hand learns to be less proud and invites your right to help. Your spine nominates your legs for a leadership position. The committee of your body votes to sit down. You veto. Clouds muscle in from the west, the kind that carry opinions and rain. You count rows. You trade 3 for 2, 2 for 1, anything for done. A rook on the boundary stone laughs like a creditor. You throw a clod at it and miss. Mercy is expensive. By late afternoon, the field smells of iron and things cut open. Your father's voice grows quiet and sideways the way men talk when they are arguing with their heart and losing politely. You finish the last furrow of your strip with a flourish no one will see. The oxen blow and stamp. You scratch the yoke. Blisters on their necks the way you wish someone would scratch yours. They toss their heads in the universal language of, "We did enough for today." You lift your eyes finally, and the road beyond the hedge has collected a thin ribbon of dust that wasn't there an hour ago. Hoofbeats count themselves. A small troop crests, the rise liveried men, a banner folded like a secret, the hard shine of a helmet that has never known mud. The bailiff reappears, suddenly eager to resemble a useful idea. Your father stands, wipes his hands on his tunic, and makes the face men make when their day is about to be borrowed by someone who owns the weak. The Lord's horse is cleaner than your soul. The Lord's horse is cleaner than your soul. It steps into the field with deliberate papal hooves, placing each foot as if it has signed a contract with the earth. The animal gleams like it was born from soap. Its mane is what your hair would be if life had chosen to be kind. On its back sits the reason your back hurts. Brocade, fur-polished leather. A face that has never been addressed by rain without permission. Men ride behind him, livery bright, even beneath a sulking sky. A banner is unfurled just enough to remind the world it could be unfurled more. The bailiff becomes a flag of attention, hat off ledger, smile loaded and aimed. Your father stands, wipes his hands on his tunic, and folds himself into the shape men take when they wish their fathers hadn't taught them so much about politeness. Good day, the Lord says, making the phrase sound like property. His voice carries the easy balance of someone who has never carried anything heavier than certainty. He reins in and looks over the quilt of strips as if admiring a bolt of cloth he will have cut into a coat later. You and the others hold your tools the way sinners hold promises. Inventory begins. It always does. The steward reads from a schedule that has the quiet menace of a prayer. Corvée tallies. Tithe reminders. The mill's new rules, which are the old rules with better handwriting. Every fact arrives with a brighter ribbon of authority tied around it. To the benefit of all, the steward says, which is clerical, for to the benefit of some. The Lord dismounts, which allows his boots to inform the field that leather is the noblest part of an animal. He walks a few paces, not enough to require a change of breath. His cloak trims the day. He squats at a furrow, pinches a little soil, rolls it between finger and thumb, like a bishop examining a relic of saint fertility. Good earth, he pronounces. Your father said the same words at noon. When he spoke them, they were gratitude. When the Lord says them, they are a receipt. Questions fall on the village like polite rain. The steward asks after the number of pigs farrowing the wheat germination, the repairs on the bridge, the state of the oven, each query arriving with the implication that the wrong answer will be corrected by the right punishment. The miller appears at the edge of things, all flour and innocence, and bows in a way that suggests his back is made of gears. You imagine him sleeping at night, with his mouth open so coins can fall in of their own accord. They inspect the oxen, they murmur about the yoke. One of the liveried men prods the iron share of your plough with a toe. Dull, he says to the iron. You consider the usefulness of pointing out that sharp things can cut in many directions. You consider your family, your house, the pig that is technically a savings account with ears. Silence wins the vote without debate. Then the collection begins the light taxation that is heavier than rain. Eggs to the steward's tally basket, a measure of oats to the sack. 2 hens promised next, Michaelmas noted with a scratch that will become a fact you cannot argue with later. Each offering is small enough to seem almost nothing and exact enough to measure the air left in your lungs. The steward smiles when people comply. It is a helpful smile, the kind a man gives a dog before taking its bone for a higher purpose. A cart creaks onto the lane, piled with dews from the far strips. Someone has tied a ribbon around a bundle of flax as if to apologize to it. The Lord does not look directly at the cart. He has staff to see for him. He looks at the sky, which belongs to God, and at the horizon, which belongs to him. Then the play within the play. Judgment hour for 2 misbehaviours small enough to fit in a pocket. A boy took apples from the wrong tree. A man pastured his sheep one afternoon, too early on the fallow. The boy is brought forward eyes like spilled ink. He is cuffed mildly and given a sermon that will keep until winter. The man is made to pay a fine that equals the price of a good bootlace. The bailiff writes lines in his book. The lines become ropes that nobody sees until they feel them. You notice the Lord's hands. They are clean and undecided, unscarred by anything that ever fought back. He clasps them behind his back as if restraining himself from generosity. A fly dares the hem of his fur. A squire removes it with the murderous courtesy of someone practiced in eliminating minor problems. He walks a circuit of 3 minutes that takes 20 to complete stopping to approve things that already existed and to promise improvements that will cost you hours. The bridge will be mended with timber you will fetch. The ditch will be deepened by hands you already own. The road will be raised by time you were saving for sleep. The words are a blessing laid on your head with both hands. At the edge of your strip he pauses as if feeling generous toward observation. Straight work, he says, and your father nods because nodding is cheaper than speaking. The Lord asks a question about the yield last harvest. Your father answers in the dialect of humility. He does not mention the storm that came sideways. He does not mention the child who coughed away her bread. Some truths are considered untidy in good company. A moment of theatre ends the scene. The Lord mounts, the squire steadies. The horse obliges. The world rearranges itself to the music of leather. He raises 2 fingers in a blessing, shaped like ownership. God keep you, he says, which in this county translates as keep busy. The banner unties a little more colour into the day. Hooves find the lane, and the small dust ribbon reappears behind them like a signature that will outlast your name. Silence returns the way. Silence always returns fuller than before, and thinking things over. The bailiff, loath to waste an audience, clears his throat and repeats the parts of the visit that require echo. He lingers just long enough to become the aftertaste of the Lord's voice, then departs to haunt the next field. The miller slips away like an apostle late for profit. You and your father stand in the old air. The oxen shake their heads. The yoke creaks the sky, chooses to remain undecided. Your father exhales. It sounds like a man paying a bill. He picks up the plough stilt. You take the hoe. The furrow waits neutral as law. Somewhere beyond the hedge, the church bell tests the afternoon with a single note. In your mouth, a taste you cannot name moves between iron and ash. Your life returns to your hands by degrees. Your sweat belongs to someone you'll never touch. The work for now still belongs to you. You go to confess, but even God smells like smoke. The church sits at the edge of the village, half sanctuary, half barn, built from stones dragged up from the river by men who thought holiness would make them lighter. Its tower leans slightly, as if listening to gossip. Every Sunday the bell calls, and you answer, not out of faith, but because the sound is louder than doubt. The path leading there is slick with old mud, and newer sins polished by generations of reluctant feet. Inside the air, tastes of wax and mildew. Smoke from 100 candles has turned the rafters the colour of despair. The saints on the wall have eyes like creditors. Their halos flicker as the light shifts so that sometimes they look merciful, sometimes merely bored. The Virgin's face has cracked. Her smile holds together out of habit. You cross yourself because everyone else does, and because it feels dangerous not to. The priest's voice arrives before he does. Latin, a tongue shaped for command, rolls through the nave-like fog that knows its way. You don't understand the words, but you recognize the rhythm. It's the same as the tax roll, the same as the Lord's steward counting hens. Faith and debt share a language. When the priest finally emerges from the sacristy, he smells of incense and onions, a man halfway between heaven and supper. His robes, once white, are the colour of forgiveness left too close to the fire. You kneel. Kneeling is muscle memory by now. The benches creak a choir of complaint. Around you, neighbours bow their heads at slightly different speeds. like a field of wheat in uneven wind. Someone coughs, someone else shushes the cough, as if silence will please the Almighty more than honesty. The priest begins the Mass, his Latin spilling over your head like rain over thatch. You catch words now and then, Dominus peccata misericordia, and let them fall into you like coins tossed into a poor man's hat. The offering comes next. A basket moves from hand to hand, swallowing coins. Eggs promises. You drop in a single copper, heavy with its own importance. The priest nods toward you, without looking, already weighing how many candles that coin might justify. The church is a business that deals exclusively in eternity. Confession follows. You join the slow-moving queue beside the wooden booth, your breath mingling with a dozen others' guilt distilled into weather. Behind the screen the priest murmurs, and one by one the villagers step forward to unload their small catastrophes. A lie about a hen, a curse at a neighbour, a thought during Lent that should have been starved out. You rehearse your own list, though most of your sins are practical. You have envied bread. You have lied to survive. You have hated the miller with enough energy to power the Sunday nothing. Dramatic, just the quiet crimes that come from wanting to live. Your turn. You kneel inside the booth. The wood smells of sweat, the faint perfume of frightened breath. The priest's silhouette leans close. Speak, my child, you begin. Words stumble out small and clumsy. You confess hunger as if it were greed. You confess fatigue as if it were sloth. The priest listens with professional patience, then assigns you penance 3, Pater Nosters, 2 Ave Marias, and for the envy, a promise to be grateful for your place in the great chain of being. Gratitude is cheaper than bread. When you step back into the nave, the candles seem to burn a little higher, as if they approve of the transaction. You kneel again, whispering the prayers you've been given, your voice keeping company with 100 others. The sound is less like faith than like rain on a roof. Steady, impersonal, strangely comforting. You close your eyes and imagine God listening, not because he must, but because he has run out of other entertainment. Outside after the Mass, the churchyard buzzes. Villagers cluster around the priest like flies around honey that can write reports. He listens, nods absolves, and occasionally condemns. The talk turns to rumours. The widow who whispers with the wise woman too often, the boy who skips the Angelus, the fields cursed by blight. Religion here is half surveillance, half superstition. The priest holds both keys, the one that opens heaven and the one that locks the oven if your taxes are late. He passes near you and nods a sign of favour or a reminder it's hard to tell. God watches all he says, which you understand to mean, I do too. He blesses a child, accepts a chicken for the tithe, and moves on, leaving a wake of incense and nervous laughter. You linger a moment longer in the yard. The bell tolls again, softer now, like a heartbeat slowing after labour. The graves lean toward one another, whispering their advice to the living. You read the names on the nearest stone, half erased, yet still dutifully recorded. The church remembers what the world forgets. Who paid, who prayed, who failed. On the way home, your father walks ahead, hat in hand. He spoke well today, he says. You nod, though what you heard was less sermon than schedule. Behind you, the church stands against the grey Patient as a tax office. Its windows catch the last of the afternoon light, turning it into something both beautiful and slightly dishonest. That night, when the fire burns low and the wind sneaks through the cracks in the wall, you think about what the priest said, that the Lord knows every sin before it's committed. If that's true, he must have known this village before he built it. He must have known the hunger, the cold, the way faith bends under necessity. Maybe that's why the church was placed on the hill, to watch, not to help. You pull the blanket over your head and whisper one of the prayers he gave you, though not in the same order. It sounds different in your mouth, less Latin, more hope. The fire pops, a small spark leaps, then dies. In the dark, you imagine God as the bailiff of heaven, ledger open, quill, ready, writing your name between sin and survival. If the Lord owns your body, the church owns your soul, and both seem happy to rent them out to despair. You need water. Every cup could kill you. Thirst pins your tongue to the roof of your mouth before the sun decides what kind of day it wants to be. The small beer you carried to the field is gone shared with your father at the halfway point where the sky pretended to be merciful. Now, the ache behind your palate has turned precise, a little blade reminding you that bodies are buckets with holes. Drink, it says. Choose badly, it adds. The village owns 3 kinds of water: the well, the river, and the rain that can't be trusted to arrive when begged. The well is a wooden mouth under a slanted roof, ringed by a half-circle of mud, the colour of old pennies. You lower the bucket and listen for the pinch of rope against the beam, a sound that always feels a finger width too close to breaking. The pail knocks the surface clap, and for a moment you imagine the water resenting you. It comes up greenish and a little impatient, with drift of things that used to be clean. You set the bucket on the lip and watch the surface steady. On top floats a film so thin it looks like an accusation. Your neighbour skims it with a reed and smiles the way people smile when they are negotiating with invisible enemies. Good draw, she lies. You nod and lie back. There are days when survival is just a chorus of polite untruths. By habit, you sniff. Water tells stories. This one says, leaf rot, cold iron. A touch of something from the pig yard that swam for its life and lost. You dip a cup and hold it to the light which refuses to take sides. Your father would drink now, quick and practical. He believes boiling is for fevers and baptisms. Your mother would bring the pot to a sputter and count heartbeats. Firewood is a ledger though, and every boil is an entry you will pay for when frost comes. Down at the river, the water is honest in a different dialect. It moves. Men upstream do things to it. Wash wool, tan, leather, rinse, sins. They didn't have time to confess. The river makes room for all of it and keeps going as if speed were the same as safety. In summer it turns sluggish and green, and the eels look like bad choices. In winter it runs clear and bitter, promising that if you fall in, you'll come out either cured or dead enough to stop complaining. Children cut the line at the well like little lords of impatience. A girl with hair the colour of wheat chaff yawns into her bucket and sends a ribbon of spit skating over the surface. Her brother flicks a beetle away and misses. It lands and rows with admirable determination. You consider becoming the kind of person who gives speeches about hygiene, then remember you do not have the reputation or the Latin for it. Across the yard, the alewife hoists a cask like a priest raising a relic. There is a reason your village drinks more beer than water. Brewing is a quiet form of safety. Boil the liquid with yesterday's courage. Cool. It coaks it with yeast that remembers the last 7 miracles, then store it where light can't make trouble. Even children sip the small beer, the version that's more kitchen than tavern. It tastes faintly of bread that learned to swim. It keeps bellies from turning into theatres for invisible plays. But ale is not infinite. Grain is law, and the law requires it to become bread first, tithe second, and only then if mercy is in stock, drink. When grain runs, lean water returns to the front line, wearing its more dangerous face. The wise woman says to steep it with thyme, mint or yarrow, to bully the tiny things you cannot see into remembering their manners. The priest says, bless it. The miller says sell it as ice in winter if you can figure out the packaging. Sometimes illness crawls into the village on its hands and knees and drinks before you do. It makes a home in a bucket and becomes a guest that will not leave. The sickness has many names and one intention. Looseness takes the children first, because children are rivers with legs. They run and then they run out. Women learn to measure a child's hours by the dampness of a pallet. Men learn to look away and chop more wood. You wrap a strip of linen around a small wrist and pretend the knot is a spell. There are rules that help until they don't. Take from the well before anyone washes their sins nearby. Draw in the morning when the night has pressed the village flat and perhaps settled its filth. Cover the bucket. Keep the dipper for family mouths only, which means telling your cousin no when his eyes already look like tomorrow. Boil for the weak, for the new mother, for the old man with breath like damp wood. Trust the rain barrel if the lid stayed true and the roof kept pigeons honest. Watch the puddles, after a storm they bloom, with small green futures no one asked for. You remember the year the well went wicked. It was high summer and the rope was tired. A dog fell in, quit swimming, and turned the cool column into a sermon no one wanted to hear. The men pulled the body up with hooks that usually find eels. They swore, spat, crossed themselves, and debated the work of purification. For a month the village tasted ash and thyme. The women boiled everything that held still. The alewife thinned mercy into math. And the priest spoke loudly about Saint Roch, who keeps plague on a leash, shorter than rumour. In the end time washed what effort could not. That is the truth about water. Most of its kindness is calendrical. Today the bucket is only half untrustworthy. You carry it home the way you would carry a sleepy cat, careful, steady, ready to apologise if claws appear. At the door your mother meets you with the cup. She trusts a small earthenware thing without cracks wide enough for guilt. She lifts it to the light and nods once the ceremony of a queen approving a treaty the weather will soon violate. For the child first, she says. You watch the girl drink lips, shiny eyes, closing in the temporary peace of relief. You wait. Waiting is the part of thirst no one mentions. By evening your stomach mutters a warning in a voice that isn't yours. You know the script, a sour wave, a cramp like a fist, the sudden knowledge that you must find a private corner in a life that does not include private corners. You step outside and negotiate with the hedge. Stars arrive in the black with their cool opinions. On your way back, in a neighbour passes pale and fast, clutching his middle like he's afraid it will escape. At the hearth, your mother crushes mint into a cup and pours water that has just forgotten its boil. The steam lifts like a prayer. The taste is green, stern, convincing. Slowly, she says, as if you might outrun the cure by drinking too quickly. Your father, who will not admit to weakness even when it borrows his voice, sits a little nearer the fire and stares at a point just left of the truth. You fall asleep to the restless country of your gut and the soft conversation of water and flame. Somewhere between dream and fever you hear footsteps in the lane and a knock on a far door. A whisper rides the night like a rumour on a borrowed horse. Go see her. Even the nobles get the looseness. They just have servants to blame for the bucket. Tomorrow you will decide whether to trust the well again or to trust the old woman who brews safety from leaves and smoke. You scratch until you bleed. Then someone whispers, "Go see her." The words travel from house to house the way smoke finds every crack. They arrive at your door sometime after midnight, when the child's fever is counting faster than the bell, when your own stomach has learned the river's grammar. No one says her name out loud with the shutters open. Names are handles, and the priest likes handles. They call her the wise one, the leaf mother, or simply she who knows where the heat hides in a plant. Her cottage sits where the village gives up and the hedge begins. The path, is a suggestion more than a road nettles on the left, repentant nettles on the right. The moon keeps her distance. You carry a lamp that spits and flinches. Its flame is the only brave thing about you. When you lift the latch, the door sighs like a tired aunt. Inside is a museum of things that used to be growing. Bundles of mint thyme, yarrow, and something that smells like rain after a fight hang from the rafters. Jars crowd the shelves, their bellies full of roots, seeds, and hopeful adjectives, warming, drying, settling, sleeping. The hearth wears a pot, the colour of midnight. The air is busy with steam, and a sweetness that reminds you of fields without mud. She is smaller than rumour. Age has folded her into the shape of a comma that promises there is more to say. Her hair is grey and undecided, her hands stained with the kind of knowledge that doesn't wash off. A cat blinks on the stool, having clearly made peace with the idea of being unpopular at sermons. "What hurts?" she asks, not wasting a syllable on courtesy. You tell her the child burns your gut, argues with itself your neighbour, coughs like a chimney confessing. She nods 3 times a little, amen for facts. "Sit," she says, and sets your lamp on a windowsill where it can worry the moths. The work begins the way all real work begins quietly. She pinches a bit of this, and a gesture of that measures, in heartbeats, rather than spoons, salts the water with leaves and words. "Mint for the belly," she says. "Yarrow for the blood that forgets to stop. Thyme for all the small beasts that don't respect boundaries." She tilts a jar, and a dark honey pours like an unhurried sermon for the child willow, the tree that stole pain from princes and doesn't plan to return it. You listen with the greed of a drowning person reading the sky. She gives you 3 bundles tied with twine that looks like it learned patience on a loom. "Boil this like a rumour, short and strong," she says of the first. "This one, let it think about boiling, then change your mind about the second. And this no fire, only time and breath about the third." She taps each bundle as if waking it. "What do I owe, you ask? Because paying is the only dignity left to the poor." She looks at your hands, decides you cannot afford dignity tonight, and says, "Bring me eggs when the hens remember virtue. And if the child sleeps before the moon does say a good word about me in the lane where the priest can hear." You nod. Bargains have many currencies. You hesitate before mentioning the itch, the ruthless private geography that makes sleep a far country. She does not blush for you. "Lard and sulphur," she says, already reaching. "The devils that bite you don't care for the company of rotten eggs." She mixes a paste, the colour of bad decisions, and instructs you like a drill sergeant of kindness. Warm the salve, a coin-thin layer, every night for 3. Wash the clothes, in ash water, as if you are trying to convince them to be honest. Will it work, you ask, because hope has lawyers. "It usually does," she says, "and when it doesn't, I make something else." She pours a little of the mint thyme brew into a cup and watches you drink like a mother watches a child cross a stream. It burns a friendly path to your stomach. A heat like permission spreads. The door knocks without knocking footsteps outside a breath. Then a man half inside with his hat fully off. His wife labours at home, he says. The baby is in a hurry. The midwife is at the other end of the village negotiating with twins who refuse to be reasonable. The wise woman nods as if babies were weather inevitable and often inconvenient. She sweeps jars into a basket with the speed of someone who has practiced every emergency. "You," she says to you, "hold that." You hold the basket. It hums with intention. On the way out, she stops at the threshold, squints at the moon, and spits for luck, a ceremony older than Latin. "Tell your mother to sweeten the willow with honey," she says, already walking. The child's tongue is also a patient. You follow her to the lane. Then peel away, clutching your bundles like 3 small saints who don't require churches. Back home, the world narrows to pot-steam cup breath. The child frowns at the bitterness, then swallows because your voice has learned the exact distance between a lullaby and an order. Your father pretends not to like his portion and then likes it anyway. Your gut lowers its weapons by inches. The night loosens. In the quiet, you hear the church bell talk to itself 2 notes. A pause. 1 more. You imagine the priest asleep by his fire dream, full of doctrine shaped like traps. You imagine the wise woman, with her hands inside a hard hour, telling it how to soften. You imagine the cat judging both institutions with perfect fairness. Toward dawn, the child stops simmering and sighs the soft, wet sigh of a body remembering the recipe for peace. Your mother presses her lips to the girl's forehead and makes no sound at all, which is the loudest prayer you have ever heard. You sit back, close your eyes, and discover that your own skin is no longer a battlefield. When morning finally remembers you, you rinse the mugs, tie the spent stems in a knot, and put the salve where light can't bully it. In the lane, neighbours exchange numbers more intimate than coins. Hours slept, coughs, counted fevers, measured by the back of the hand. Someone mutters that the priest warned against visiting her. Someone else replies that warnings do not lower temperatures. You walk past the church and nod because nodding is the safest verb. You walk past the mill and do not nod. You look toward the hedge where the path forgets itself and feel a small disobedient gratitude. Maybe the herbs worked. Maybe the smoke did. Maybe belief is a medicine brewed in the dark when no one is taking notes. Her magic might be herbs or just hope dressed in smoke. The fire dies before the sun rises. It doesn't go out with drama. No hiss, no last flare of courage, just a quiet surrender into grey teeth of ash. You poke the heap and it answers with a shrug. The smoke that used to scratch your throat has turned polite, which is winter's favourite kind of cruelty. Heat is now a rumour carried by people with thicker walls and better neighbours. Your breath is visible. It ghosts the room curls over sleeping faces, makes a small fog around the child's mouth. She dreams in little knots, but she is cooler these days. The wise woman's bitter teas have bullied the fever back behind its hedge. Your mother lifts the girl's hand and holds it against her cheek, the way poor people hold coins tenderly with inventory. Outside, the world is made of noise that can't travel. Snow takes sound by the scruff and scolds it into silence. The lane is a sheet of white decisions. Roofs hunch under weight like guilty shoulders. The hedges wear their thorn crowns. Somewhere the church bell practices a single note and abandons it as if even God can't be bothered to finish a sentence. You roll from the pallet. Straw cracks like thin ice. Every movement announces itself to your bones with paperwork. The boots are stiff, trying to remember foot. You coax them with hands that have become a collection of split moons. Your father grunts a greeting, and a weather report that is mostly teeth. He wraps his cloak, which is a generous word for a wool habit that has committed several crimes against comfort. Breakfast is calculation, pottage thinned to a philosophy. A heel of bread, the colour of last year's dusk, soared into democracy, with a knife that knows everyone's name. The alewife's small beer has become smaller water with a memory of courage. The pig is long gone, a festival eaten in instalments, but its fat hidden in a pot like a secret gives the stew a talent for pretending. Your mother lifts the lid and hesitates, then adds a finger width of that old sunlight. The smell turns the room into a story about warmer months. You close your eyes and listen. Winter is not one season, but many. There's the bright beginning when snow looks like forgiveness, the mid-bitterness when it becomes debt. And this the hunger part, when you learn that time can move slower than a sermon and faster than a loaf. People stop asking, "Is it cold?" and start asking, "How much is left? Left of grain, left of wood, left of you." Work exists in winter. It just changes the script. Fields sleep like beasts digesting. You visit them anyway to remind the soil you still believe in its future. Tools get mended by hands that can't feel the awl. Fences accept their fate. Oxen steam in the pasture, like kettle's ribs under fur, like the staves of a sad barrel. You rub their necks and apologize for Hayes' arithmetic. Some mornings you go to the river to bruise ice. The surface holds a mirror that edits your face unkindly. You lift the iron bar, and the world answers with a crack like a cathedral confessing. Beneath the water is black and moving, busy surviving its own problems. You fill the bucket, and your wrists burn with pain, the colour of bells. Back at the cottage, the ice reforms in the pail, as if time had a petty personality. Hunger is democracy here. It votes in every house. The miller's door stands shut more often. Flour goes to the Lord first and to rumour second. The alewife stretches her wart like a parson stretches a metaphor. The wise woman walks faster basket, heavy with instructions and roots. At the oven house, the oven's keeper stamps his feet, not from power, but to keep his blood from thinking about stopping. Women stand in a line that is less a cue than a theology of patience. The dead move differently in winter. They wait. The ground refuses to open until bribed by picks, and the kind of sweat that freezes as soon as it learns your name. A man from the far strips, Reeves' cousin, the one who laughed like a dropped spoon, goes under this week. The bell tolls for him, and for the hour, and for everything that refuses to be counted. The priest speaks of heaven with a tone that suggests he has the floor plan. You stand with your hat in your hand and listen to promises that will be warmer than your bed tonight. At home, the child braids straw, with your mother making small ropes that will become mats, that will become barriers against the conversations of wind. Your father sits by the hearth, reading the fire's future in ash. He decides to go gleaning where the gleaning has already been done. You stop him with a hand on his sleeve, because dignity is a poor coat. He shrugs half gratitude, half argument, and stays. In the evening he fixes a broken tooth on the rake with patience he did not use up on God. The body learns new tricks. It forgets heat first, then softness, then fairness. Your stomach has two voices now, a low one that petitions and a sharp one that negotiates. Bread becomes a clock. You eat by seconds. Sleep comes like a shy animal and leaves like a tax collector. Dreams are noisy with soup. Yet the village makes a little theatre of survival. Someone mends a fiddle string and plays 3 notes of something that remembers being a tune. Children skate on the pond with bones, for skates their laughter a rumour of June. The midwife passes face raw, with wind eyes bright with stubborn. The wise woman meets you at the well and slips dried apple slices into your palm without words. They taste like a memory you don't deserve. One night, the sky clears and turns endless. Stars multiply until counting becomes a form of worship. You step outside, stand in the lane, and let the cold wrap you the way truth wraps a lie tightly, without malice. The village is asleep or pretending. The church tower cuts the sky like a reasonable accusation. You think of the stories the priest tells saints walking into snow with cheerful faces, miracles occurring at temperatures that break hands. You prefer the miracle where a neighbour shares marrow. Back inside the fire whispers like an old friend who can't climb stairs anymore. Your mother sets out tomorrow's ration with the exactness of a ledger. So much for morning, so much for after, so much for God knows. She touches your cheek with fingers that have argued with water all day. Sleep, she says, stern as a blessing. The child has drifted into the lightless country where dreams keep their coats on. Your father finally stops, rearranging wood no one owns. You lie down, and your bones admit that the straw is not an enemy. The wind plays its harp along the rafters. Somewhere, a fox invents hunger in a new key. You count the tasks waiting for you when light returns. Ice buckets, fences, animals, the arithmetic of ash. You imagine spring as if imagination were tinder. You fall asleep praying. The dawn still remembers your name. You wake up sweating, and the village has gone silent. Not quiet the kind of silence that grows on a tree and gives shade, but a silence with teeth. The rooster seems to have misplaced his opinion. Even the church bell, which usually tells the day what to do, has forgotten its verbs. You touch your own forehead, and your hand comes away with a small wet confession. The room smells like old straw, and fear boiled down. The child is cool, thank the herbs, and whoever invented hope. Your mother sits up without sounds, the way people do when they have bargained their dreams into behaving. Your father coughs once a dry origami of a cough, and says he's fine in the tone men use, when fine is a plank they are standing on alone. Outside, a red cross blooms on someone's door, a flower painted with a brush that doesn't forgive. Under it, chalked words, God have mercy. The door is tied shut with charity that looks like rope. You see a shape move behind the shutter, a hand against a crack, then nothing. The lane, usually a democracy of chickens and curses, is empty. A dog sniffs a threshold and decides against any future that includes it. The plague doesn't arrive on horseback. It comes as a rumour that learns to walk. It begins with a neighbour who took cold and ends with carts. Some call it God's wrath, others call it bad air, a few call it the price of living close enough to breathe each other's sins. The wise woman calls it, by its work, heat swellings, a drowning without water. She burns juniper in doorways until the village smells like a forest on trial. The priest processes with a relic and an argument, Latin breaking over empty windows. He blesses the street from a distance pastoral care, measured in cubits. You fetch water from the well with your breath-held dipper wrapped in cloth, like a newborn truth. You boil it until it scolds you for doubting, and still you doubt. The bucket handle leaves a bruise in your palm that looks like the letter for maybe. Your mother wipes the table with vinegar and words that were common long before the church borrowed them. When she hands you onion to hold under your nose, you obey, and your eyes water for several moral reasons. By noon, the bell starts again. Single-spaced, deliberate a metronome for sorrow. It tolls for the widow in the North Strip, for the boy who ran messages faster than lies, for the wheelwright's old father, who insisted on sitting in the sun and letting the day count him. The sound falls into the village like a slow rain and gathers itself into puddles of panic. You try not to count then. You count anyway. The bailiff pins paper to the church door, orders from somewhere farther up the food chain. No fairs, no visits, no gatherings, besides God, who apparently cannot catch anything. The oven house shuts. The mill keeps turning because hunger does not respect quarantines, but the miller stops smiling as much and shouts measurements from the doorway. He ties a rag across his face, the way a man might tie his dignity to the mast in a storm. The swellings arrive like unwelcome guests at a wake. A boy's neck blooms into fear. A woman's armpit hardens into arithmetic. Heads grow light thoughts. Slow breath quickens. Some shiver as if winter has developed a personal grudge. Others burn so high the room goes wavy with heat that the fire did not provide. People begin to speak in the tense reserved for mistakes you can't undo. The wise woman brings poultices that smell of earth and courage. Sometimes they help. The priest brings oil and certainty. Sometimes that helps too. Mostly, time chooses without asking. You stay inside as much as a life like yours allows. When you must go out, you hold your breath, past the chalked doors, and step wide around a bundle left for the healer apples. A rabbit, a desperate thank you, wrapped in nettles, to keep honest hands away. You pass a cart with 2 wheels and 3 blankets. One of the blankets moves and whispers a name. The man pulling the cart whispers one back, as if they were exchanging passwords to a city that refuses entry. Night is a new country. The lanes empty of footsteps and fill with prayers that don't want to be heard making a scene. Somewhere far off, a group of flagellants passes on the high road. Strange men, with bare backs, singing debt into the sky, convincing themselves that pain pays better when paid out loud. The village listens, then decides to stick with its usual economy of suffering. You wake at midnight to the sound of fumigation, the healer's assistant swinging a pan of herbs through a neighbour's open window smoke, coiling like a ghost learning to dance. The air tastes of rosemary and apology. The child turns in her sleep and finds the cool again. You touch your own throat searching for geography you hope is imaginary. Your fingers find only skin and the drum of your heart trying to teach rhythm to fear. Morning returns obstinate. In the churchyard, graves are dug shy and shallow because the earth has grown tired of opening. The gravedigger, a quiet genius with a broken hat, works with the speed of necessity. He hums unhelpful hymns. The priest stands at a distance and arranges ash into sentences. Names are said, some stick. Others slide off the day like rain off a polished helm. You notice the gap where your neighbour should be and realise that absence has a shape. On the 3rd day, the bell misses an hour. You stand surprised by the way silence can suddenly feel like mercy. Your father crosses himself slowly, as if drawing a map. He drinks a mouth of beer and says nothing, which is how men cry when houses are made of listening. And then the slow edge of mercy. The new crosses fade under rain. The cart rests against a wall. People open doors and show faces that look as if they were sculpted in a hurry. The wise woman sleeps. The priest mutters thank yous that sound suspiciously like arguments he lost and now claims as doctrine. Children reappear like weeds, not quite believing in tomorrow, but interested. You sweep your threshold with a broom that has opinions about dust. You throw open the shutter and let a thin April in, though the calendar disagrees with your optimism. You walk to the well, lower the bucket, and this time the rope does not sound like a sentence. At home, you boil the water anyway and brew time because caution has become a cousin. You lived. It doesn't feel like victory. It feels like a house where furniture has been rearranged by an unkind guest. At night, when the wind is busy being wind, you still hear bell strikes the day has already spent. You sit by the fire that remembered how to burn and notice a new thing inside you space where voices used to be. You live, but the silence lives with you. At dawn, they hand you a sword and call it honour. It's not much of a sword more argument than metal, but the sergeant presses it into your palm like a sacrament. The levy has been called, the Lord's banner unrolls its appetite, the bailiff reads names the way a butcher reads a list he wrote himself. You don't remember volunteering. You remember a knock on the door, your father looking smaller than his coat, your mother's mouth shaping a prayer into a warning. The yard fills with men who look like you fieldbacks, wind faces, hands already holding invisible tools they are not allowed to bring. A proper soldier laughs at your boots. They'll drink half the road, he says, and he's right. Mud has always found you attractive. The sergeant walks the line thwacking shoulders with a stick. Stand straight, he advises men bent since childhood. Breathe, he says to a village that learned the economy of air in winter. They show you the moves, the way you might teach a scarecrow to dance. Thrust, recover, hold the shield like you mean it. The shield smells of old rain and the last man's fear. A knight canters by visor, up teeth bright as the moon's more expensive cousin. Remember, he says, God sees all. You notice God has provided him a horse and you a sermon. The march begins with a noise like duties being dragged across stone. Feet learn a new mathematics. Bread is counted into days, ale into distances, curses into miles. The road unspools through hedges and across little bridges that have seen this parade before. Fields pause their green to watch you go, and cows render opinions you cannot translate. You pass a village that looks like yours, with the furniture rearranged. Women stand in doorways, holding children who have decided not to blink. Tents blossom near a stream, as if canvas were a kind of plant. They sort you into tens with a rope and a joke about discipline. Your tent mates are a map of accident. Ned from the far strips, a miller's son who will not admit it, a cobbler who keeps looking at everyone's feet like a priest, hearing confessions, a boy who lied about his age and now owns the lie. A drummer practices at the edge of camp, searching for the rhythm of courage and finding the beat of complaint. Training is repetition dressed as revelation. A captain explains formation in the tone of a tutor hired by destiny. If the archers do their work the way archers pray, if the pikes hold like a wall of stubborn trees, if the horse goes where it is pointed and not where it prefers, then victory is a promise that might visit. You practice bracing the spear against a charge that exists only in the captain's eyebrows. The spear vibrates in your grip like a nervous thought. At night, fires gossip. Stories turn into armour, this lord or that one. A victory remembered with extra colour, a defeat explained by weather and treachery. Someone sings a song whose chorus is mostly stomping. Someone else sharpens a blade with the intensity of a man making a smaller problem out of a larger one. You sleep as if someone else ordered it and wake to find your neck has opinions. The morning of the battle has the indecency to be beautiful. A field broad as the inside of a psalm mist, lifting like a curtain, skylarks writing love letters to the wrong audience. Across the shallow valley, the other army arranges itself into categories. Banners with ideas, men with pikes, a row of armoured weather, the whole grammar of killing declined correctly. Your side answers with equivalence. Priests walk the line, sprinkling water on helmets and hopes with equal accuracy. The first sound is distant drums. The second is the whisper archers make when they pull 100 strings tightening the sky. Arrows leave in a black flock and arrive as punctuation. Men drop into the grammar of the ground. Your captain raises his hand and the line steps forward because feet have become citizens of this command. The noise outruns your ears. Steel, deciding horses, explaining physics to fleshmen, remembering their mothers in languages they didn't know they spoke. A charge comes a metal river breaking banks. Your spear meets it with a shudder that travels from your hands to your teeth. For a breath, the world is perfectly simple, push-hold live. A horse rears hard enough to invent the moon. A knight tumbles like a saint falling out of a painting, and the line wobbles but does not confess. You find yourself yelling with a voice you didn't pack. Then mud enters the chat. Rain arrives in a stare of drops. The field turns treacherous, and men who practiced standing together now practice falling alone. A man to your left slips, and his shield becomes a pond. You drag him up by a strap that doesn't want to cooperate. He thanks you by continuing to exist. Ahead, 2 lines make a new geography called melee. Swords write short essays on the subject of ribs. Someone blows a horn with the confidence of a prophet and the accuracy of an optimist. Time breaks. You live inside a thimble. A face appears enemy, friend, stranger, all 3, and vanishes behind a helmet that looks surprised. An arrow arrives late to a conversation and sticks its opinion in a calf. Blood becomes a rumor that proves itself. Your hand finds a hilt that isn't yours and swings. The impact travels up your arm like news. You think of the field at home, the furrow that waited, the rook that laughed like a creditor. You think this is also a kind of ploughing. At some point, minutes, hours, the centre gives like old bread. Your captain shouts something useful that the wind edits into poetry. The other side tests the idea of leaving and likes it. They become backs, and then smaller backs, and then a story. Pursuit is proposed by the mounted men and accepted by their horses. Your job becomes not dying in the tidy aftermath of victory. When the noise loosens its teeth, you notice that you are standing. You notice your hands shaking like bells left alone. You notice Ned grinning with half his face, because the other half is elsewhere for now. You notice the boy who lied about his age, sitting very still in the wet, holding his side as if modesty were a bandage. You notice a knight on one knee, whispering to his god as if negotiating interest rates. The field which was a church this morning becomes a marketplace. Men trade water for thanks, rags for promises, mercy for the chance to breathe without paying. The surgeons arrive with knives and knowledge, and the knowledge is cruel but competent. Someone finds the captain's hat and tries it on. It fits nobody. You sleep in fits, if sleep is the word for what happens when a body turns itself off in protest. In the night you wake to the slow weeping of an animal somewhere beyond the hedge, and the slower weeping of a man 2 tents away who has discovered his strength, went home without him. You drink thin ale that has learned humility and watch the moon pretend not to stare. At dawn, fog sits on the field like a jury. You are marched back through villages that clap because they've been told clapping is part of the cure. You carry home a bruise the size of a theology, a cut that will become a weather oracle, and a quiet behind your ears where bells used to be. The Lord accepts thanks on behalf of your survival. The priest sermonizes about God's favour as if he signed the muster roll. You fought someone else's war and survived by accident. You laugh for the first time in months. It starts as a cough that changes its mind halfway through. You don't plan it. The laugh arrives like weather no one ordered, and the boy beside you, Ned's cousin, the one who counts geese by mood, stares, then grins, as if you've smuggled spring over the parish line. The village green, usually a place where announcements go to be misunderstood, is suddenly full of colour and noise. Banners borrow the wind. Stalls lean at polite angles. The oven house huffs warm breath like a tame dragon. The air tastes of yeast and apples that decided cider was a better career than fruit. They call it the fair though reprieve would do, after a winter that argued with your bones and a war that lectured your nerves. The day opens its hands. People pour into it with the caution of survivors and the speed of hunger. The bell rings not for the dead, not for the hour, but for the beginning of something that might briefly ignore endings. You arrive with a pocket that contains exactly 3 coins and a plan to behave. The plan lasts until you smell roasting meat. A spit turns slow ceremonial dripping fat into a tray where onions learn to be saints. Your mouth forgets economics. You trade 1 coin for a trencher and a slice which is not generous but is honest. The first bite is so good you look suspiciously at the sky, as if being watched by jealous angels. Grease shines your fingers. You wipe them on bread you were pretending to save. Music finds you. A fiddler saws at a tune that remembers the sea. A tabor keeps time like a cheerful tax collector. Children orbit the sounds spinning until they fall over with the luxury of harmless failure. 2 women clap a rhythm while a third braids ribbons into a maypole that has opinions about geometry. Your feet begin to rehearse possibilities they haven't considered since last harvest. The cobbler off duty, and drunk on daylight, stamps out a jig, wearing a grin that proves shoes are unnecessary for brief joy. Commerce blooms. At the cloth stall, a bolt of blue tries to seduce the entire parish. Your mother touches it, then withdraws her hand as if the colour might require confession. She bargains instead for thread, and the serious grey that becomes useful when beauty has to share a house with chores. A potter thumps clay into patience. His hands explain shapes to the crowd. At the edge, a boy with a trained goose tells fortunes with the accuracy of a cloud. The goose pecks at a card, and the boy declares, "You will live long enough to get tired of soup." People applaud the realism. A proclamation pole has been decorated with the usual commands. Don't weigh bread with your thumb on the scale. Don't water ale until it forgets it was ale. Don't swear oaths with your hat on. Underneath some wit has chalked, "Don't be caught." The steward pretends not to read it. The priest, who is attempting to look festive without endorsing spontaneity, blesses a basket of pies as if they might join a monastery. He speaks kindly today, which is either theology or strategy. You nod and move on, before kindness becomes obligation. The bear man arrives with a shaggy argument on a chain. Children cheer until their mothers make the sound that means "I love you" more than noise. The bear stands, waves a paw with a philosopher's melancholy, and sits. You put another coin into the hat because it feels right to reward effort even when it is reluctant. A juggler follows keeping 3 apples airborne while reciting a scandalous version of a saint's life. Apples belong to gravity, so do saints. But for a minute both look adjustable. Food multiplies honey cakes the size of regret cheese that squeaks when bitten pears, pretending they weren't bruised on the way here. The alewife pours with a wrist flick that is half art, half public service. Her small beer has grown marginally less small. She winks at you over the rim of a jug. "You look like a man who remembers dancing," she says, and you consider denying it, then decide the truth has had too much work lately. The dance begins with reluctance and ends with laughter. Hands find hands, some calloused, some cautious. You step, turn, forget, recover, muscles, rediscovering a map you thought winter burned. Ned whoops at the wrong moment and invents a right one. A widow with fierce, patient eyes takes your arm and steers you through a figure that suggests she has solved harder problems than your left foot. The drummer grins. The ground agrees to be solid for once. Between tunes, the world tilts. A drummer's boy is telling a soldier's story in the heroic key, and your chest answers with a quieter version. You lean against the ale stall and study your own hands which hold a cup without trembling, but remember how. The noise of the fair recedes to a soft rug under a heavier thought. Then a small, sticky hand tugs your sleeve. The child, cool now curious again, offers you a toffee that used to be a coin. You take it. Sugar snaps you back to the visible day. Afternoon folds into a warmer light. Trades are settled. Arguments untied songs, recycled with new lies for old verses. The wheelwright's daughter wins the foot race and refuses to be sorry about it. The blacksmith kisses his wife behind the bee skeps with the determination of a man who understands finite summers. 2 lads try wrestling near the hedges. A third referees with rules he wrote and revises as needed. Somewhere the miller laughs without counting. Even the priest forgets his frown long enough to drink a cup of something that smells of apples and good decisions made too late. You spend your last coin on a ribbon you have no business buying. It is not for you. It is a strip of borrowed sky for the child's hair, a sliver of mischief for a day that otherwise behaves. When you tie it, she stands very still the way children do when praised by silence. Your mother smiles without looking at you, which is her way of acknowledging a conspiracy of tenderness. Evening strolls in wearing gold. Torches wake along the green. Musicians take the courage up a notch. Notes climb. Someone with a voice like velvet and smoke sings about a river that refuses to forget the names thrown into it. You sit on a cartwheel and let the song find ribs. You thought the war borrowed forever. Around you, neighbours glow a little in the firelight, as if warmed from the inside by some domestic star. Then the showman announces a marvel, a lantern box with painted saints who move when the light argues with them correctly. Children gasp as figures walk across a cloth world. Adults pretend to be unimpressed, failing beautifully. The wise woman stands at the edge, arms folded, watching carefully for the line where delight turns into fraud. She catches your eye and nods once an apostrophe in the sentence of the night. You walk the edge of the green and count blessings without using numbers. The oxen are still yours. The roof still believes in staying up. The child's laugh makes a new room inside your chest, where war refuses to sit. Somewhere beyond the hedge fields rehearse their spring. The night smells of spice and forgiveness. When the last tune loosens, people drift home in slow, satisfied commas. The fair folds itself like a letter you plan to read again tomorrow. Stars take over where torches retire. You carry the sleeping child light as the promise she is, and your mother hums the tale of a song that doesn't know how to end. At your door you pause and look back. The green is a smudge of embers and voices. The bell, merciful for once, keeps its opinions. For one night, you didn't just survive, you lived. Tonight in the woods the old gods wake. You step off the lane where hedges end their sentences and the trees begin theirs. Frost whispers to itself on the leaves. The moon is a thin coin someone forgot to spend. You carry a bundle that isn't heavy bread, a pinch of salt, a ribbon of last fair's blue, but the meaning of it weighs enough to change your walk. Behind you pad the softer feet of neighbours who are not neighbours after dark. They are pilgrims, unlearning their catechism, one cautious breath at a time. The clearing appears the way a secret appears slowly, as if tested by your intentions. Someone has already stacked a cairn of wood in the old circle. Stones keep their seats like elders, who refuse to be moved to the warm side of the room. The wise woman stands with her back to a beach, arms folded, eyes bright. She is both host and witness, judge and jury of wonder. A few men from the far strips arrive with looks that say they'll call this a joke tomorrow if asked by daylight. A girl cups a candle as if it might try to fly. The child squeezes your hand twice, once for fear, once for permission. You wait for the late ones, and the bolder ones arrive. No priest, he has a cold, arranged for nights like this. No bailiff calendars do not list this hour. Even the miller comes face undecorated by flour, carrying nothing but his curiosity. In the hush, the wise woman clears her throat, and the night listens. Shortest day, she says, longest dark. We feed the dark, so it tires and lets go. Her voice is rope, not whip. The fire asks to begin, in the old language tinder breath, a stubborn spark, scalded into flame. It climbs, the kindling remembers its tricks, and turns into a pillar that negotiates with the stars. People step forward without stepping out of the habit of humility. Gifts go onto a flat stone, a heel of bread, a twist of wool, a thimble of ale, a sprig of rosemary, 3 apples with dents that do not cancel their sweetness. Your mother sets the salt down like a crown. You offer the ribbon. It takes colour from the fire and becomes a strip of captured dawn. A drum finds a beat older than clocks. Feet answer. Not a dance exactly more, a rehearsal of walking with intention. The circle breathes in the same paragraph for once. Someone hums a tune whose words were never written down on purpose. Your father's face, usually carpentered into usefulness, loosens. He closes his eyes. You see the boy. He was the one who ran the ridge and furrow like a ship's deck and believed the horizon could be persuaded. Smoke folds itself into your clothes, your hair, your memory, the night's permanent ink. Sparks lift like messages for birds who can read. A woman steps to the edge of the firelight and names her dead quietly mother-son, a friend who turned his hat brim down for the last winter. She doesn't ask for their return. She asks for their company. The rest of you nod because you have started to understand that absence is a form of presence with its own manners. The wise woman scatters a pinch of something into the flames. The sparks answer in a higher key. For sore bellies and sore hearts, she says. You think of the well's treachery and your mother's mint of the fever that unlaced the child and let sleep tie her again. You imagine the herbs carrying your gratitude into the wood smoke's slow river. The miller coughs, embarrassed at being relieved. Even embarrassment warms your face tonight. A tale is told because tales attend this fire like trustworthy dogs. Old Tom, whose beard is mostly rumour, speaks of a winter when wolves came down to the hedge and elected a leader. The leader, he swears, knocked at his door with a courtesy unacceptable in wolves and asked for a hot stone to sleep by. The fire approves the story with a crack at the right moment. Children lean in, adults lean back, and for 4 minutes the village becomes a theatre so convincing that nobody thinks about tickets. Then a quiet you recognise but can't name arrives, the kind that makes you look up without instructions. The moon has edged itself higher. The trees admit a little more light. Your breath ghosts forward and disappears as if invited somewhere better. You realise, without proof, that the turning has begun. The wheel bored with its position has nudged itself toward the light. You feel it in your wrists, the small calendar kept by blood. There is a ceremony of walking. The circle widens into a path around the fire, each person marking a wish with a footfall. You wish for simple arithmetic seed, enough rain, enough wood, enough hours that equal the work and leave change for laughter. You wish for strengths that arrive quietly, like the way the child holds a cup now, without bargaining. You wish for the war to forget your name, and the bell to find other subjects. You wish for mercy for those who paid in advance. At the far side of the clearing, the wise woman catches your sleeve. Take this, she says, and hands you a small charm, a loop of willow, tied with 3 hairs from her cat, a joke that resists being only a joke. Hang it where smoke sits, she adds, so the house remembers to speak kindly. You nod not because you are certain, but because certainty is a poor guest on nights like this. Magic and memory drink from the same cup when the dark is this long. Someone begins the old call and response. The questions are foolish on purpose, because foolishness is armour. Why does the sun sleep? Because it worked all year. Who will wake it? We will, if our feet remember. The answers shuffle around the ring, wearing a grin as ancient as the ditch in the next field. Laughter slides across the fire like oil on a pan. The stars who have seen better liturgies, and worse, do not object. Food makes its round, thin stew made generous by passing hands a cake that has saved 2 plums for the exact centre cheese with more character than weight. You eat with the reverence of the undeserving who decided to show up anyway. You pass the bowl to the miller, and he takes it without measuring. Tonight, even scales learn some manners. Later, when torches become ideas, and the trees stop listening so hard, the circle loosens. People drift to the edge to tell the sort of truths that cannot be spoken at noon. A girl admits she wants to learn letters. An old man confesses he stole a handful of peas from his own fear and planted them where fear couldn't find them. 2 lovers negotiate next spring in sentences that lean like saplings. The child falls asleep upright against your side head, a warm stone. You carry her home along the black seam of the lane. Frost encrusts the hedge like 1,000 small agreements. Behind you the fire settles into its afterlife. Coals glow vows, written in red, and then erased by good sense. Your door receives you with its usual complaint. You hang the willow charm where smoke pauses to think. The house inhales and decides not to argue. In bed straw remembers your shapes kindly. Your mother pulls the blanket up with the efficiency of long practice. Your father, already half in tomorrow, mutters something about the east fence going sullen. The child sighs a syllable of a dream that has no chores. You listen to the rafters, edit the wind into fewer words. You think about the ledger that owns your sweat, the bell that rented your silence, the water that flirted with your death, the field that taught your hands to read, the wise woman who brewed answers from leaves, the fair that tried laughter on, your ribs the battle that stole an hour and left a decade behind. You think about how the world keeps asking the same question, can you go on, and how, so far, you have not run out of ways to say yes. Outside the night completes its small miracle without applause. In the morning, the sun will be a breath nearer an inch, kinder a thread of gold, sewn back into the grey. No proclamation, no sermon, no tax. Just light, arriving late, but not ashamed. You weren't meant to be remembered, but you are. You've just walked through another forgotten corner of the past. Not the world of kings or saints, but the quieter country where most of humanity has always lived. The small rooms, the muddy fields, the faith that bends but doesn't break. These are the places where history truly breathes. Here at Poor Historian, we don't chase the noise of glory. We listen for the whispers, the sound of a wooden spoon scraping the last meal from a pot. The hush before a bell tolls the breath of someone still alive after everyone richer has gone. The poor never wrote their stories, so we try to lend them a voice slow and steady, the way truth prefers to travel. If you've stayed this long, perhaps something in those voices found you. Maybe you recognized a little of yourself in their endurance. The quiet act of getting up again, of doing the work that no one will ever sing about. That's what this channel exists for, to remind us that survival is not small, that dignity can live in the dirt, and that memory is the gentlest kind of rebellion. Take a moment before you go. Let the sound of their world fade but not vanish. Picture the candlelight softening the corners of a cottage, or the hush that follows when the last tool is put away. Those lives are long gone, but their echoes are patient. They wait for anyone willing to listen without hurry. If you want to keep walking these narrow paths of the past, the ones that smell of smoke, sweat and stories, you can help them stay lit. Subscribe to Poor Historian and let history find you when the world gets too loud. Leave a comment if a scene or a sentence stayed with you. That's how we keep these voices alive. And if this journey brought you a little calm, a little wonder, or just a better kind of silence, share it. Someone else might need that stillness too. There are more lives waiting here. Peasants, healers, builders, soldiers, mothers, ordinary souls who made the Middle Ages anything but dull. Their stories don't demand attention, they earn it. Each one is another piece of the great mosaic of how we got here, not through brilliance or conquest, but through persistence. So, as you close your eyes or drift into sleep, remember, this history isn't only what was written, it's what was endured. And somewhere in the dust between centuries, the poor are still telling their stories softly, stubbornly, gratefully to anyone willing to listen. Thanks for listening, for remembering, and for keeping company with the forgotten. We'll meet again in the next quiet story.